Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. We'll start the meeting with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks again for coming out, everybody. Councilwoman Ferris will be here shortly, so we'll get started without her. Any additions or corrections, Dan?
I have none.
Wayne?
Nothing from me.
Nothing. Okay, I've got a couple things. We'll add engineer's report update, or the engineer's report, J1. And then I've got a couple things under the mayor's report to add, a joint ventures update, and then appointing the canvassing board for the election, so we don't have to have a special meeting for that. So, with that, I'll approve. Hey, Tim, did you have anything?
No, I don't have anything.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
You do have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda. Any questions for administration on that?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, thanks, Dwayne. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We don't have visitors tonight. Mayor's report. A couple things. I'd like to appoint, every year after an election, we have to do what's called canvassing the vote. We can't do it tonight because it's too soon after the election, so rather than have to call a special, we just say, okay, the county's approved it and we have to approve it. So I'd like to appoint Tim, Linda, and Josh as our canvassing board to do that at the appropriate time. Thanks, Josh. I didn't talk to you beforehand, but you're on there. So,
Way to step up.
you know, with that, I would entertain a motion to approve that.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Dan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for doing that. Other thing, appointing EDA member. Talked to John Emke at KM Telecom, and he's graciously accepted to jump into the role that was vacated by Jill. So I'm going to recommend to the council that you appoint John to the EDA. Any questions on that?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, thanks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. John comes with quite a bit of experience in the family. I think he'd be the third or fourth generation who served on the EDA with the KM Telecom family, so he was pretty excited. His mom was really excited to encourage him as well when I was talking to him, so it was a family affair there. I just wanted an update on the joint ventures. So as you know, we have that joint venture between the City of Casson, City of Manorville, and the school district. We put $15,000 in a year, the school puts in $15,000 a year, and the City of Manorville puts in $7,500 a year. So all that goes into the pot, and then we fund different projects throughout the communities that all the communities kind of use together, whether it's equipment or facilities. So today, the pickleball court bench installation and the Braxton Raymond Memorial sign at the basketball courts at Lions Park, those were funded partially. I think we received about $39,000 for those two projects, and those two things were just completed here in the last week. And then we bought a dump trailer together. So rather than each governmental unit having to get this dump trailer, they all coordinate. Somebody stores it, somebody coordinates, and then they all use it for the brush pickup and everything. So that was $14,000 that we get the benefit from there. So it's working well. I think over the years, and I'll try to do this after each of the meetings, City of Casson has had projects in the city of about $81,000. And then there's shared project of $83,000, so that's more than what we've put in. So that's what's going on there, and then that is it. No cards for comments. On to public hearing, Sunday liquor hours.
Okay, included in your package, you've got this item which, we've discussed it before. So we'll have a public hearing tonight based on the feedback from council. It's a small adjustment in the hours of operations for Sunday liquor sales. It would allow for liquor sales to start at 8 a.m. rather than 11 a.m. as previous.
Okay. I will open the public hearing regarding the extended hours for Sunday liquor sales. If anybody has anything to comment or add? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. As far as council goes, are there any questions or comments? The only thing I have is, I wasn't at 2 meetings ago when this was brought up, and I agree with what Dwayne said in that meeting, you know, we don't like making policy over one-time events, but I can see this becoming more than a one-time, and it basically centers around where the request has come up is the NFL games that are in Europe, and there's 5 or 6 of those games this year, and it would just give those places opportunities to have events if they could have them. So it may be more than just a one-time thing. That's just my opinion. Any other comments or concerns, or?
I think it's a good way for businesses to be supported, you know, in the community.
Yeah, I don't see it being...
I don't think it's a big deal, but they have the option that way.
Doesn't mean they have to be open, but they can.
Right.
I'm not a fan, but
Right.
lack of public resistance, you know, I don't have any objection to it.
Okay. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ryan, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to committee reports, EMS committee.
Sure. EMS committee had their meeting last week, and they took the feedback the council provided at the previous council meeting, especially as related to the leash law, as well as some of the housing concerns that were discussed previously. You've got the minutes included there previously. So I think after they discussed it a little bit more, they decided to really hone in on what their biggest concern with the animals at large was, which was that they're off the leash. So what you've got included in your packet there is a red line copy of what they're recommending, or a possible recommendation to adjust the language. It's not a big adjustment. Currently, it at large reads, off the premises of the owner, not under the control of the owner, or other competent person by leash not exceeding 8 feet in length. So they want it just to be a little bit more clear. And so what they have there is, animals shall be controlled by a leash not exceeding 8 feet in length when off the premises of the owners. Otherwise, they shall be considered running at large. So, I guess, you know, Ryan was there, and, you know, I don't know if there's any feedback you have, Ryan, but they kind of distilled it down to that point, basically.
We went back and forth we talked a lot about people that have underground fencing, and it does work, but the times it doesn't, what do we do? Or then they're not actually on a leash, and once they're off the property, they don't actually use the fence anymore, so we had those conversations, and just changing the language of it, we thought would be more beneficial, would be more understandable.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of the wording, honestly. Because there are, you know, I live along the bike path, and I see people walking the bike path with unleashed dogs all the time. And if they have a well-trained dog, then a leash isn't necessary. This is requiring a leash, and we've got a value of 8 feet on it. Who's going to be out there measuring with their 8 feet? So I think at the end of the day, I think anything that it's not under the control of the owner or a competent individual and on a leash, period, that's all the language that we need.
So say that again, what length?
Off the premises of the owner and not under control of the owner or other competent person, they should, or accompanied by leash. Yeah, so the question is whether do we require a leash or don't require a leash. At the end of the day, if they're under the control, whether by leash or not by leash, by training, that's what matters to me. If they don't have control, then we've got the at-large animal. And I'd like to get Josh's opinion on, you know, what he thought about this.
Because he wasn't at the meeting.
Yeah,
Most of the time when it comes up, it's usually a dangerous dog.
right.
We rarely write for a leash law violation. It's usually a dangerous dog that ends up running it out and biting another dog or a person.
Mhm.
And we go the dangerous dog route or potentially dangerous dog route. It's usually how we deal with it.
so really, the leash isn't the issue, it's the dangerous dog?
That's usually what happens, is, so you have a leash law violation, the dog's not under their control, and it usually ends up biting somebody or another dog, and we go the route of the potentially dangerous dog.
I've seen people out there with 4-foot leashes, I've seen them out there with 20-foot leashes.
Yeah, the retractable ones.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
seen that.
yeah.
And I've seen them out there with no leashes and the dogs
Are right there.
right there.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, 'cause not every animal is the same, just like not, how do you, I don't know, that's tough.
Part of the discussion was not, even if it's a trained animal, it's still an animal. It has instincts, it doesn't
Sure.
always, just because we've trained it really well, doesn't mean it's always going to follow that. I mean, I thought of when we talked about not under control of the owner, some families walk their dog without a leash, but they have like a shock collar with it. And when it's not walking by them, they shock it. So in that moment, it's under control, but that person stops to talk to someone, they're not on a leash, but they have their shock collar, they're not talking to someone else, they turn away, that dog bolts. But you were under control of it in that second, but then a second later, you're not.
Well, the other problem I have, let's say you have a short fence in your yard, they're in a controlled yard, if they jump the fence, you're not gonna have them on a leash in your yard. So, a leash ain't gonna protect somebody, I mean, if they can jump a fence, I've seen dogs jump 6-foot fence. So how do you say that, how do you stop it from jumping the fence? And say that was because, in your yard, you don't need a leash. Well, as soon as it jumps the fence, well, it wasn't under control. But, so, I don't think the leash is gonna stop them.
No, and I think, Ryan, you made my point, that if they're not under control, no matter what mechanism, that the owner's responsible, and then we've got the dangerous dog policy to fall back on.
I mean, I hate to see anybody, person or animal, get attacked by another animal, but how,
I don't think we're trying to change the wording to make it so that people are calling in constantly about dogs not on leashes. We have enough other ordinances with pets that aren't being followed by citizens now, to where it's not really about that, it's just, when it does happen, what determines if that dog was under control or not, is more than anything. It's to make sure that when one person's walking down the street, they feel safe walking their dog across from the person that doesn't have their dog on a leash. To me, I'm fine either way, but that's just from hearing what people were saying at our EMS committee meetings, there was concern about dogs that are not trained or on a leash well enough to be safe, and then being afraid to walk down the street because that dog is not safe.
I know you probably don't know the answer now, how many at-large dogs calls do you get a year?
So, we discussed the potentially dangerous and dangerous dogs, where an actual fight occurs is usually about half a dozen a year.
Okay. Do you get any leash law calls?
No. And most of these dogs that do attack another dog or a person are usually, they run off the premise. It's not like they're out on a walk along one of the sidewalks or a bike path.
So the leash isn't gonna stop that? Well, I mean, it could, potentially, I mean, you can't say it won't, but if they're running off the property, see, that's the problem I have, saying, now you got people in town that have been walking their dogs for years and never had an issue, their dog's controlled, and now you're telling them they have to have a leash, potentially, or they're in violations, and...
Well, we also want them to have their dog registered, but they might not be.
Right.
We have, 25 to 40?
So it almost sounds like it's another rule we're putting out there that we're not gonna enforce.
Yeah.
So it's already there, we're gonna change it, but we're not gonna enforce it unless, I don't know, it's tough, I'm with you, Dwayne,
Which is why I think we need to keep it simple. I would suggest that off the premises of the owner and not under the control of the owner or other competent person by either leash, training, or other control mechanism.
The wording already says they have to have a leash, and it has the word "and" in it, correct? The original yellow. So they have to be off the premises and under a control of a competent owner by leash, not exceeding 8 feet. So the at-large already says they have to be on a leash, based on the word "and," I assume.
Yeah, but I don't know if we wanna put that on there.
But it's already there.
That's the yellow.
That's the yellow's there.
I know, it's already
Yeah,
there.
that's already there, so we're,
But if we're looking to suggest changes, and that's what the red line is, maybe we ought to change it to, for the better.
I think it's just clarifying the language.
But you took out of there, with your clarification saying basically it's leash only, you took out the fact that they could still be controlled by the owner. You know, you're taking that out of there, you're just telling them the only way they're controlled is by a leash.
Yeah.
But I think it already says that.
Well, it's saying, it's not under the control of an owner, so it's saying it can be controlled without a leash. Now you're saying leash only. You're not,
We might be reading it differently.
What would you have to say about that?
I think it, as written, it currently does require to be a leash. I don't
Leash.
think that you're adding
Yeah.
anything in there. I think that it's required currently, off the premises and not under the control of the owner by leash not exceeding 8 feet in length.
Yeah.
So it's already,
It's already in there.
it's already in there that way. We're just trying to, I think the change in it was to clarify it better, because we're having this conversation, and we're not sure what it means. So changing the wording makes it more clear, it's not actually changing the rule.
I guess I get the same,
Yeah.
or more confused with the new wording than the old wording.
Okay.
It's not, I mean, if we're gonna change it, it needs, I don't know, it just doesn't,
You could send it back to EMS, and we could find a different way to word it, and bring back the concern of council of, we don't want to be having to have phone calls constantly about leashes, because that's one of the concerns.
Yeah, it's a policy that, as Dan said, we're not gonna enforce, so why have the policy? You know, let's make the policy that's more enforceable, and we can do that by saying, not under the control of the owner or other competent person. That's enforceable. And leave all the other stuff off,
Yeah.
because then it goes to the dangerous animal thing.
because when you start putting in a length of a leash, you can retract it, say, oh, no, well, it's not 8 feet. You know, I mean, there's too many gray area in that one. And every leash, you know, you can buy any size leash and just say, I don't know. That one's tough.
We're spending a lot more time on this than we probably
Needed
need to.
to.
So here's the thing, how about if the next EMS meeting that you'll be at, you guys...
He was at the last EMS meeting, they discussed it too.
Oh, I was, okay. The language is obviously confusing, so if you can just
That's
take another
fair.
swing to make it just really direct, simple, short, and something that we're gonna enforce. Because I'm in favor of, if we're gonna have a policy, we need to enforce it. If we're not gonna enforce it, then we should leave that part out. Because that just opens us up to liability if we have a policy we don't enforce. And it's not against, that's not an indictment on you. I'm sure we have a whole book of policies that are impossible to enforce. So if we just start with this one, that what's enforceable, make that the policy. So, okay? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chief. Whew. The next one.
Sorry.
This should be really good on the next one.
This will be short and sweet. They did talk a little bit about that rental housing concern that council had discussed.
Mhm.
And based on the guidance of the council's directive was that they were not interested in increasing that program at this time, or the programming related to that. So what they did do is they did review it, they did talk about it, and they did have this document here, which is it's a sample of a housing complaint form, which could be used more specifically if we do get a complaint, as opposed to just a general complaint we get from the complaint form we use for anything. It'd be more specific to a housing issue, and then it would be a little easier for us to follow up on. So I anticipate just utilizing that. We don't receive a lot of complaints typically from most complaints we receive are from neighbors complaining about long grass or garbage, and we use a regular complaint form for that. This would be more for someone who's complaining about their landlord directly, or some internal component of the home that's not up to code. So, just to let you know, so, there you go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Nice and sweet. Old business, let's see, new business,
G1, I think we've got, old
G1.
business.
Yep. Election results?
That's right, review election results. So, if you looked in your Dropbox, you should have a updated version. I know that the council's not canvassing these results because of the state's timeline guidance, but we did want to just have those for you to review, and if there's any comments, possibly just advising us of direction you'd like us to take related to the advisory ballot question. So, it's included in your packet.
Congratulations, everybody, except Dwayne. I guess congratulations in order to...
I'll take it too.
You did exactly what you want. Yeah, everybody won, right? Yeah. So, yeah, so...
Out of place.
That stuff's pretty easy. So the ballot question obviously passed 70% to 30%. And what we asked the taxpayers were, here's an example, here's how much the tax would be, that type of thing, and they overwhelmingly said yes. So I think we need to go back to the EMS committee, but that $7 million is our hard top.
That's what we put
Great
in.
if it was less than that, but that's the hard top. So if the next step is to now to get, what's their names making, ICS back in, and then it goes to the bidding process, that we just need to make sure when they put that bid package together that anything over $7 million is not gonna be entertained. So that's a hard top from what the people said, so.
Honestly, you would ought to maybe even cap them less than that because they always are overages.
Right, they just need to keep in mind that, anything...
So, yeah, I mean, the
You know what I'm
project,
saying?
the actual project, the physical project is, I think, like $6 million, is what their estimate's, like 5.96, because, they have engineering costs, they'll put it to it. So the $7 million needs to be all-encompassing, it needs to be the physical
Design.
building, as well as, when you've already accrued a certain amount of design costs, that'll be encompassed into that issuance, and then there are further design costs they'll have, and administration of the programming. They did send me a tentative timeline, which I wanted to run past you. I advised them that it was probably not going to work quite right because we don't have a council meeting. They wanted to look at that last council meeting of the year it would have been on 12/28 for a potential to issue contracts, but we don't have a meeting that day. We have it on the 21st. So I think the timeline they're looking at is for council to potentially authorize bids at the meeting of the 23rd, and then that would go out for bids on the 25th, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving. The bids would be due back the 20th of December, and then the council would be reviewing the bids before their first meeting in January, and then depending on what those bids came back at, you would have an opportunity at that first meeting in January to either approve a bid or, as you've noted, if it comes in too high, say, we need to rebid it or we need to cut something out or something like that. That's kind of the timeline they've given me. And I was at interestingly, we're looking at cash flows and things like that. At the open house meeting we had last week, I think that they're not anticipating a lot of the construction to actually start until possibly late spring, early summer now, because of the procurement times. So it might be that we'll have to work on the timeline for, how are we gonna stage, if it goes forward, stage like fire department equipment and storage of equipment and things like that. I indicated to them that made more sense to me, frankly, because it's easier for us to store other vehicles outside in the summertime than it is in the wintertime. So, depending on how aggressive they want to be. But, so I guess I'm looking for feedback on that potential timeline, or if there's anything else you'd like me to relay to them. Part of the reason I think they're looking at that is because they do feel like this is the best bid environment they're going to get is this time of the year. It's typical for them, so.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, the people spoke on it, so
Okay.
bring that back.
Yeah, well, I'll email that out to you all so you kind of can see it and let you know what it looks like, and then I'll let the ICS folks that know that that's kind of what we'll plan on doing.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Can I ask one question on the results? In Manorville, they used to give us a list of the write-in names. Is that something we've ever done? We used to give a list of the write-in names.
Yes.
It was kind of fun to see those, more than anything.
If you want to see them, you can call Sarah at the county.
Okay,
The machine scans them all,
yep.
but we don't have to now go through every single ballot and write them down.
Okay.
So she does have a list. I don't have the list.
Okay.
It was fun being election judge when we used to have to make the list of all the write-in names, because you had to write them all down. Some people are pretty,
They stopped making
clever.
us write down Mickey Mouse's and stuff like that, but when
Or worse.
you come in and your friend writes your name and you write your friend's name, we have to count all those. So everybody is a judge, or something. So, we
I was just thinking like
stopped
chat
doing
down.
that, and the machine scans it all, so
Yeah.
there is a list.
Just curious.
Perfect, good question. On the new business, the sidewalk removal,
Sure. This is a gentleman, and you've got his letter there included. What he's looking at is removing some sidewalk in his front yard. And you've got the overhead shot of the property as well. It's down in the southwest quadrant of Castle on 2nd Avenue Southwest there. It was brought to my attention that he's got this sidewalk that sort of goes to nowhere. It doesn't actually connect into sidewalk anywhere else. So he's asking to remove it. It'd be at no cost to the city. So we advised him we would bring it to council for your review.
Is there any future plans by the city to extend any of these for safe routes or city walking or anything? I mean, is that a plan that we're looking at connecting anything that's nearby?
Well, one of the long-term projects the city council has reviewed at their work session every year, the last 2 years, is our southwest rebuild, which is something that, obviously, it's part of the flood control, so it's a project pending a lot of funding from the state. And I don't know that we've gotten to that point where we've actually fine-tuned whether there'd be extension of sidewalks. That would be up to the council at the time, whether you would choose to extend sidewalk in further areas.
Yeah. Is there any nearby? I mean, this picture doesn't...
Across the street on the west side, there is continuous sidewalk that goes all north and south.
Okay,
And you can barely see it in that
Yeah.
picture, but it is
Yeah.
right along the edge of that picture. That's
Okay.
the sidewalk on the west side.
okay. 'Cause that was what I was curious, if there was nothing and we were gonna add, 'cause there was something down the street, then we wouldn't wanna remove it, but if there's...
And the blocks to the north and the blocks to the south, on the east side, where Mr. Grendall is, have no sidewalk.
Okay.
He's got like, what is that, 30 feet of sidewalk that goes from the corner to his front walk.
By the
Not
look,
even across.
And there's nothing down the others, yeah, I see that.
by the looks of this picture, it's not in the best shape either.
Mm-mm.
I think if we ended up tearing it out, it'd have to new have stuff anyways.
And we're not giving up right away.
No.
So if we choose to put it back in the future, we still can do that.
We had to have it ADA compliant then anyway, so it's
And then that'd be
not now,
just
so.
wider and, okay. That was my big question, was
Yeah.
what was nearby, so.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second. Oh, do we,
we can still have discussion
Yep.
after the second, so. I just wanna make sure we're not setting a precedent here. You know,
Mhm.
so is are we proving this because it's, obviously, just by the picture, it's in disrepair, besides the fact that there's no contiguous sidewalk there at this time. But I would hesitate to say because it doesn't go anywhere. We have a lot of people that build homes right now on the edge of town.
They go now.
I was one of them 10 years ago that the sidewalk went to a cornfield, and just now they're putting in the rest of the thing, so
Right.
I would be careful to say because it doesn't go anywhere, because eventually it might.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason we do this is because it's basically a liability, and it's just like a piece of his property, it's not even the whole thing there. I just don't want to set a precedent, because we build a lot of sidewalks that don't go.
Right.
We make developers put them in where it's every
Right.
other house for a while, when there's a sidewalk, but then not a sidewalk, and then a sidewalk, so just to be careful that we're not.
Well, and that was why I was also curious about future plan, but
Yeah.
if the future plan determines we're putting them in, we still have the right as a city to put it back in.
With
I
that,
think we will advise him of that in our official letter back to him, would be
Yeah.
that at a future time, if this is reconstructed, the city council may choose to put sidewalk in as part of this project.
correct.
Yeah, and as long as it's worded that, so we have a copy for future,
Okay, so is that a good first and a second with that
Yep.
notification to the property owner?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Fee schedule, first look.
So it's just as it says there, this was the current fee schedule. We were expecting to have red line copies for you before the end of the year. Right now, we're working on a a sewer rate study, which I don't suspect will have that in, so it'll probably take effect in 2023 as opposed to for next year. So anyways, other than that, we're looking at the different rates, and if there's something that jumps out at you, if you have feedback in any of them, please let us know. Linda and I will sit down with Nancy, and we'll be doing some reviewing of that, along with the department heads, Howie, and the different things that get tweaked every year. So just want to put that in your hands.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that right now? Okay, just review that, questions at the next meeting if you have any. On to the gas easement on 8th Avenue Southeast Connect.
Sure, and I could talk about this a little bit. Our city engineer could also talk about it. So, this is something that's been requested to us by the folks over at Minnesota Energy, in extension, going into the Vale subdivision. You'll note that there's currently, a gas, I don't know how you'd call it, substation there, kind of just southeast of the water tower. If you drive past it, you can see it's above ground. It's where they have some additional valves and things like that. And apparently, basically, there isn't an easement currently, or, so what they're looking at is two different things. They're looking at an easement for that area that goes over that sort of substation, as well as an easement that would extend west into the gas pipeline, into the subdivision that's being created. The city attorney and city engineer and myself reviewed this earlier this week, and there were some questions, so I don't know if you want to talk about those at all, Melanie or Brandon.
Go ahead.
We did provide the comments to Mark regarding when we do all that to the north there, we may have to install our utilities, our public utilities, along with some other private utilities across that easement, so we've asked for some of that verbiage to be added in the outlot, or out in the easement to accommodate the outlot if that ever develops. So I guess maybe approve it if council's open to approving that condition of staff reviewing it and working on the final language, so.
We just don't want to box ourselves in where we don't have the
Yep, I mean,
ability.
we're working together.
Yep.
We all got to play in the same sandbox, if you will, literally, so, yeah, I think we can work through it, so. We just don't want to get stuck on the hook for some future relocation costs, so.
Okay.
That's what I'd recommend, is approve it condition of staff with final approval of the final verbiage.
You concur? Okay. Any other questions we have? Okay, I'll make the motion to approve with staff review and approval.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Southeast Minnesota Initiative Foundation.
Sure, so this is Region 10's SEDS actually report, and so it's something that you probably don't recall, you may not recall, but it was something that was discussed a little bit this summer. The region, so Region 10 doesn't actually exist in Minnesota. In Minnesota, the state's cut into different regions for planning purposes, and in southeastern Minnesota, that regional planning authority was abolished. However, in order to get funding for some of these programs, for example, some of the regional transportation that we've talked about, they have to come up with this report. And I attended the session, and Dan also was part of the steering committee for this group. So just, once again, more informational for you to be able to review kind of what they're seeing as, the economic development concerns and labor concerns and that sort of thing. This report's intended to allow them to go out after funding for additional resources for transportation, education, that sort of thing. So if you have any questions about it, you can let me know, and I can forward those questions on to the folks at Smith or Brenda at the Assembly League. So,
Thank you. The administrator's report.
sure. Let me get down to that here. Okay. So you've got a couple informational items in there, budgets coming together, funding from the states coming together. One thing I wanted to talk about a little bit today was the capacity auction and power supply. So included in the package, you've got summary forecast for this year going into next year. It's been submitted to MISO. So you can see that our coincidental peak for the summer was actually up 1.2 megawatts, which is pretty substantial. Part of that's due to growth, part of it's just to the weather, that sort of thing. The only concern then is that we'll have additional capacity that we have to cover next year. The nice thing about it is that they've actually split the capacity auction into 4 parts for next year, which means that we won't have to cover that coincidental peak for the whole year. It'll just be mostly for the summer that we'll be peaking really high because of the usage. So I'm expecting that to be a little bit more cost-effective for us. And you have a couple items in there just to highlight. If you get questions about, why do things cost what they do, Xcel, who is our, transmission power supplier through the Compass Group, they're looking at a 21% rate increase for their users. So, now, we won't have a 21% increase, but those costs are real, and they are being passed on to the city. So we have to try to manage our rates the best we can to make sure that the utility is still, breaking ground. So, just so anyone ever questions, you can say, well, here's what Excel's rate increases, and they're going to the PUC, and they may not get the 21%, just like the natural gas folks will go and they'll say, hey, we want 30%, and they'll get 15. I suspect that Excel will be more like 15 or 14% they'll get, but it's still quite a substantial amount. So, just want you to see that and kind of see what people are looking at when we're talking about these. It's a big hit, and it's going to continue to be part of the reason. It's not because Excel necessarily wants to raise the rate, but they're taking on a lot of renewables. And that means that they have a lot of additional costs because they're expanding transmission. Because when I was at the Chamber of Commerce today, and they had a presentation on the new wind power farm, so to speak, that's going to be in western Dodge County, or potentially in western Dodge County. Well, in order to hook onto each one of those turbines, they have to extend their infrastructure. And so the cost of that I think they term it distributed energy, because it's not like a power plant where it all comes down to one area. It's distributed. There has to be lines that run all that in additional substations. So, part of it's Excel it's an IOU. It's an investor-owned utility, so they want a rate for their investors. But part of it's just that their costs are substantially higher. We're fortunate to have a municipal utility which limits the rate increases, but we will be seeing a utility rate increase as part of our fee schedule this year. It's not something that we're not going to be able to absorb that, forever. So, just got that in your hands. I think that's the bulk of it.
Okay.
Oh, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to take those. And then I have a couple questions from Nancy. Well, one question from Nancy I just wanted to bring up. The street assessments for the Highway 57 project are due on November 15th. She will be transmitting those assessments, if they're not paid in full before that, to the county at the end of the month, so like the 1st of December. Her question is what to do about the folks who pay between the 15th and the 1st. Because, she's indicated to me, in the past, the council has charged those folks interest. She wants to confirm that for this year as well.
That's our past practice. We'll continue the same practice. November 15th is
What she would do is then it won't be a lot of interest. It'll just be a prorated interest over those 2
computed
weeks.
for the date or whatever it is. Yep.
No, she just wanted to confirm that, and she wasn't able to join us tonight. She's off on vacation today. So, okay, so I'll let her know about that. And then I have one other quick update. That the liquor store project, which we've been working behind the scenes for quite a while on, we're going to be toning it back. We're going to be pulling it back. We were hoping to be able to do a little bit more, complete remodel, but we're going to have to focus in because the costs have driven so much just on the roof and the exterior, and then sort of resetting the interior. They went out and they got some quotes, and the quotes were so substantial that Kathy and I agree that it doesn't make sense for us to do that kind of an overhaul. It would require us to, potentially bond or, not going to debt, but we'd be spending the entire liquor store reserve fund to do a project which the contractor, ICS, has even told us, in their opinion, the smart thing to do would be to do the 3 or 4 things we really need to do: extend the life of the current building, 10 to 12 years, and then at that point, the, council could revisit and say, okay, do we want to do a tear down, basically, and redo it. So that's kind of where they're at. So, I have a meeting with Kathy and ICS tomorrow to see what those numbers look like, and then before the end of the year, we expect to have those in the council's hands, so.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Tim at all? Okay, thanks, Tim. Engineers report, updates.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just going to start a list here of projects. I'm just going to go through them as a quick update, nothing formal to process tonight. Trunk Highway 57, wrapping that project up. That is scheduled to be open next Thursday. Open, done, everything done. Next Thursday, safe routes to school. It's all the trails around the school. We have a final punch list kind of walk through as we're wrapping that project up. Planning on that being completed this season. And then 16th Street and 5th intersection is going to be next summer when school's out. So we've delayed that portion of the project. We don't really want to jam that intersection up with construction when we're getting to school. So I think that's been a past discussion of the council. So I want to update there. 16th Street, we had that short closure there Saturday and this past Monday. So all that work is complete, so we don't have any more closures there. We had to kind of shoehorn in that subdivision there, so we got that done without a hitch, or too big of a hitch, I guess. So that's wrapping up. Common Acres, we've kind of completed some punch list stuff, so that is now kind of open, and we're gonna start issuing some building permits out there in Common Acres, so if you're looking for a new lot, that's available. Vale, we got all our utilities in, so we're accommodating the apartment complex construction, so they're proceeding, and then we'll be paving that out next spring, so it's gonna kind of sit over winter. Lions Park and the library, that, we did a punch list, that is completed. We'll be processing final pay application probably at the next council meeting. Fairgrounds Water Tower, we're pushing some more removals that we need to do on that project, and then that ultimately is gonna be, constructed through the winter and then painted next spring. Zoning maps, as we talked about before the meeting, we excited to see some new zoning maps, so those are not only on the table, but it's also, we, have created a kind of a hot link to GIS on the city website, and we're gonna update that dynamically, so if anybody's looking for a zoning map, it's online. In addition to that, I do also note that we actually have the cemetery, map that's also a GIS portal that the county put together as part of your guys' agreement with the county and their GIS group, so we actually have that online, so you can search who's buried out in our cemetery, so I think that's pretty cool that we can do that and we can search that, so, that's online just as a FYI. Sump pump inspection program, we've got 30-ish properties, I think, that are kind of lagging, that have been paying this $100 a month fee, so we sent them another email, or excuse me, another, letter out to kind of spur some, so I think we've got another handful of them that are kind of getting with the program, if you will, and getting, those guys all checked off, so we're wrapping that up.
Sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
I&I report, what are you thinking timeline? Are we gonna get that before the end of the year?
Yep, it's right here in my inbox, so we're wrapping that up. We want to include some of the manhole inspections that we have in this I&I report within the sump pump program, so we're kind of waiting for that to wrap up so we can include it, so that's happening. And then probably the big one is the 16th Street Roundabout. We submitted our semi-final sign plans to MnDOT actually today, so we're wrapping that up. We're struggling through some right-of-way stuff with them and some review stuff, but we are kind of finalizing that. And then again, that roundabout is planned to be constructed early spring till July 1, when the rest of 57 is detoured. So looking at paralleling that and having the two projects go at the same time when the detour is going to be through the dump road like it is today. So just letting you guys know that that's proceeding. So that was a lot of stuff going on. We're wrapping everything up, and it's been a struggle to get everything completed, but we're getting there, so.
What's your timeline on 16th Street Roundabout for putting it out for bid?
Don't quite have that. We're gonna have to have probably February timeline. I don't have a hard date. I gotta get some final approvals from MnDOT and then obviously bring it to council and keep that ball rolling. But we need to get that thing bid here so we can get going in April, so that's the plan.
And Excel was planning on moving those poles in November. If it gets too frozen, are they gonna be
Yeah,
able to
maybe
do that?
December. I'm not worried about winter
They can do it in
timeline.
winter.
Yep,
That
and they're
doesn't matter.
finalizing some easements that they're gonna need to retain, so we may have that at the council at the next meeting. We just pinged Excel actually today for those, so they said they're working on them, we're gonna have them shortly, so we'll run those by staff and get those easements in place, and we've coordinated with MnDOT on how those easements are gonna work, because that ultimately will be MnDOT right away, so we've got lined everything up here kind of towards the end of the season here to get it all wrapped up, so.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
It's plenty, so if you got any questions, let me know.
Any questions for Brandon? Thank you, Brandon, appreciate it. Nothing from our attorney tonight? Thank you. Any questions on correspondence? Okay, hearing none, entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion.
Thanks, Ryan. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Dan, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
What you got this time, Zach?
We're meeting the next